What are we doing?
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Nova Scotia Free Speech Bulletin podcast. It's my pleasure to have a former guest back on. He's with on us several times. He did blood clot and surveys, surveyed embalmers all over the world. And we welcome Tom Haviland back to the podcast. Welcome. How are you today, sir?
Doing great, Tony. I just got back from an interesting weekend. I was invited by Mr. Taylor Moore, who's the president of the Tennessee Funeral Directors Association, to be a guest speaker at their annual convention that they had in Franklin, Tennessee, just a little south of Nashville. So on Sunday, I actually did a briefing to an audience of about 60 people in the room, half of which were funeral directors and embalmers, and actually do active embalming. So we were able to glean some information. I actually ran a survey at that meeting as well. And since we talked last, a lot of things have happened, Tony. You know, we've run now, myself and Laura Kasner have run 3 annual worldwide embalmer blood clot surveys that cover the United States, Canada, UK, Australia, and New Zealand. And we did that at the end of years 2022, 2023, and 2024. And the shocking thing is in our latest survey, 83% of embalmers around the world, 250 of the 301 that responded to our latest survey, are still seeing the white fibrous clots at the end of year 2024. And they were seeing them in an average of 27% of their corpses. So these things are not rare. These white fibrous clots are quite prevalent. In fact, here's again a live sample that provided to me by Richard Hirschman. I'm sure you've seen these before. Richard showed them on the interview. Yeah, this one's even bigger. Look at this one, Tony. It's about a 5.5-inch clot and about 1/2 inch wide. And this one was taken out of the abdominal aorta. It's one of the largest blood vessels in the body. Runs down from your heart down towards your abdomen. So these things are quite prevalent, and obviously they're causing strokes and heart attacks. In our latest 2024 worldwide survey, we also took a look at the microclotting issue, continue to look at that. That's what the embalmers describe as looks like coffee grounds or dirty blood in the drainage coming off the corpse as they're trying to put the formaldehyde in. So, and that can be just dangerous as the white fibrous clots, because the microclotting occurs at the capillary level. They're very small blood vessels and can block the exchange of oxygen into the lungs and then the carrying that oxygen to all your major organs of the body.
This is engineered to kill. The goal is when it's gone.
Yeah, people like, for example, that have brain fog or might have vision problems, that could be a good evidence that they're having microclotting going on in their head. So it is a serious issue. But what was really cool was we got a chance for the first time that a state funeral director association actually recognized this enough to be a serious problem that they invited me to come to speak to their people live at their annual convention. So let's take a look first at the results of that, and then I will show you another briefing I'm getting ready to do for another event coming up. So we'll share this one first. Okay, can you see that on screen?
Yeah, it's coming. Tennessee.
Let me see if I can get it in presentation mode. Oh, I can't. I'm sorry. This is a PDF file, so we'll just scroll through the slides. So, as I said, I spoke to the membership that was there for the annual convention in Franklin, Tennessee, on Sunday, June 8th. I was wondering, why did you start a conference on Sunday? Then it dawned on me, that's actually a good day to start a conference if you're in the funeral director industry. You understand why? Because churches are usually filled with regular services, right, where people are going to church. So you usually don't have funerals on Sundays, if you think about it. Most funerals take place Monday through Saturday. Because Sunday, yeah, because you want an empty church for the people that are going to attend the funeral, right? Whereas Sunday is being used up by the congregation. So that's why actually Sunday is a good day to start a convention if you're in the funeral industry. So this survey I took a paper survey basically and had them fill it out. Then I had a box that they could fold up their survey and put it in, and they could stay anonymous as well. They didn't have to reveal who they were. when they took the survey. First question I asked him was, what's your current position? And we got a total of 28 responses. 3 of them were funeral directors only. They didn't do embalming. And then there were 3 people that were just embalmers only. They weren't, doing any funeral director duties these days. But there were 22 of them that actually are both. They're both funeral directors and they do active embalming. That kind of surprised me that there was that many. But most of them actually, as Richard Hirschman's told me, Richard has a degree in both as a funeral director and an embalmer. But as you know, Richard exclusively embalms these days. He doesn't perform any funeral director duties. He doesn't work. But a lot of these are from smaller funeral homes in the Tennessee area, so they do double duty. They're both a funeral director and an active embalmer. So that's good. That pleasantly surprised me. We had a pretty good number of active embalmers responding to the survey. The first question of note I asked him is, have you seen the white fibrous structures, clots in the veins and arteries of your corpses during the first half of 2025? Remember, this was one of the most important things about doing this is I wanted to see what the embalmers are seeing in 2025 because, the last worldwide survey we did just covered through the end of 2024. So these embalmers are kind of our canaries in the coal mine. They're telling us what's happening now during the first half of this year. As you can see there, out of the 28 that responded, 18 of them said that they are seeing the white fibrous clots in the first half of 2025, and only 10 said that they were not. So it's a 64% versus 36% no. That's in our last worldwide survey, like I said, 83% of the embalmers said they were still seeing the clots. So this number's down a little bit from that, but as you can see, it's still, almost 2/3 of the embalmers, Tennessee embalmers, are still seeing the clots. Next natural question, Tony, is then in what percentage of your corpses have you seen the white fibrous structures, clots? And you look there of the all the answers. If you do a weighted average, including the green bar, where 5 embalmers and funeral directors said they saw none, you still get a weighted average of 17% of their corpses. So that's like 1 out of every 6 corpse has these white fibrous clots in them. As you can see over there on the left, 12 of the embalmers said that they saw the clots between 1 to 20% of their corpses. Another 8 embalmers said they saw the white fibrous clots between 21 to 40% of their corpses. And 2 embalmers said they were seeing them still between 41 to 60% of their corpses. And as I've said before, this is a phenomenon that the embalmers saw in 0% of corpses prior to COVID and the vaccines. This is a new phenomenon starting in 2020, but then really catching fire in 2021 after the rollout of the jabs.
Just a coincidence, right?
Yeah, correlation, not necessarily causation, but man, I'm seeing an awful lot of correlation here, Tony. Here's a new question we asked in this particular survey, and I might put this on the my annual survey at the end of the year as well. What's the longest white fibrous structure clot that you've seen removed from a corpse in 2025? 5 of the embalmers said none. 9 of the embalmers or funeral directors said a 1 to 2 inch white fibrous clot. 7 of them said between 3 to 5 inches long. 5 embalmers or funeral directors said 6 to 12 inch long white fibrous clot. And there was even one that said he pulled out one that was longer than 12 inches in the first half of 2025. So very interesting results.
That's incredible that this is, well, I guess it's not incredible. It's sad that this is even happening.
Well, I think you've probably seen Richard Hirschman's 19-inch one that he has in a real long tube. Has he ever shown that to you?
I've seen a lot of them.
He puts it up and it goes from his armpit all the way out to his hand. That's how long the tube is, and it's about a 3/4 wide inch clot, pure white. They're real ugly looking, just running the whole length of that tube.
I can just imagine the pain that person was in.
Oh my goodness, it's unbelievable. So the next question we asked is, has any family, this is also a new question, by the way, has any family member of the deceased ever asked you to look for the white fibrous structures clots in their loved one, or asked if you found a white fibrous structures clots in their loved one in 2025 or any year prior? Of the 28 embalmers and funeral directors who responded, only 1 said a family member's ever asked them that question, which I thought is very interesting, isn't it? And I could think maybe a couple reasons. Go
It is
ahead.
very interesting, Tom, because I don't think people are well educated on this stuff. They're brainwashed to think this is all a conspiracy. People aren't using their own minds to think on their own without having the media tell them what to think. And what we need to do is say, do you believe you have your own mind? This should be a question. And if they say yes,
Yeah,
well, then why aren't you looking at
yeah.
all sides? Like today with Tom Haviland, this survey.
Yeah, and you're right, Tony. And it is bizarre, isn't it? Because people, they should know that, especially if you have somebody in their 20s or 30s, maybe early 40s, that was physically fit and they just died suddenly. Wouldn't you want to know? Hey, check with the embalmer as you're doing anything with the vascular system. Could you look for anything unusual, right? Because I would, if that was my child that was on the table there, my 20 or 30-year-old child, I'd want to know what the embalmer found. You know, but I think that people might be too, like I said, they may not be even educated about it. I'll add that to my slide, by the way. Thanks. They may be too embarrassed to ask the embalmer to look for it. Or, they may not suspect because maybe there was nothing unusual about the death. So they didn't suspect anything, was wrong. But then there might be some people in denial, right? They may suspect that there's something unusual, like the clots killed their loved one, but they're in denial. They really don't want to know the answer to the question because, especially if you're a person that may have suggested that your loved one get the COVID-19 vaccine, right? You wouldn't want to find out later on that the COVID vaccine may have caused the clots that killed your loved one after you recommended it to your family member.
See, the thing is, Tom, people are not thinking for themselves anymore. They're letting other people do the thinking for them. And they need to look at all sides and decide for themselves. And this is the seed we need to plant in everybody. Say, hey, you don't have to believe Tony Lohnes, but I post this on Lunenburg Community Board. It's a local board, my
Yeah.
last podcast. And some guy come back and said, oh, he's just a conspiracy theorist with a tinfoil hat on. And I'm laughing. Well, you didn't look at the post that I just put here. You just assumed I was a
Right.
conspiracy theorist without thinking on your own and actually watching the video.
And like you say, why should they be trusting the experts who have lied to us over and over again? They lied to us about, the shot being safe and effective. They told you the shot would stay in your deltoid muscle in your upper arm. It doesn't. It goes all over your body. They told you the mRNA would only last for 2 days to a week. It doesn't. They have scientific papers showing that still producing spike protein for over 700 days from your last injection. It's just been one lie after another. And also, if they think that we're conspiracy theorists, how come only 10 to 15% of the people are taking the jabs these days? If the vaccines are indeed safe and effective, how come it's still not 80% like it was at the very beginning taking these? 4 out of 5 people have quietly shifted their position and are now not they're with us. So the people that are still taking the shots, they're the ones in the minority. They're the ones that I think they're a conspiracy theorist, if anything, because the majority of people have figured it out, Tony. They
They
either
have
never
figured it
take the
out.
shots in the first place or they stopped taking the shots a long time ago. So the next time they call you a kook, well, they say, well, most of the country must be a kook because hardly anybody's taking the shots, right?
No, a lot of people had stopped taking them.
Absolutely, and correctly so. The next question we asked the Tennessee embalmers and funeral directors is, have you seen evidence of microclotting, known as coffee grounds or dirty blood, in the drainage of the corpses in 2025? 19 of them said yes, that was 70%. 8 of them said no, which was 30%. So again, fairly close in our latest worldwide survey from last year. It was, I think, 78% said they were still seeing the microclotting. Now, this is a phenomenon that embalmers and funeral directors had seen prior to the COVID and the vaccines, but in far less than 5% of their corpses. Typically, chemotherapy patients is where they find coffee grounds from time to time. But if you look in the red there, you see if you do an average of all the bars here for this survey, these Tennessee embalmers and funeral directors are seeing the microclotting in a weighted average of 17% of their corpses in the first half of 2025. There were 10 of the embalmers and funeral directors that saw the microclotting between 1 to 20% of their corpses. 5 of the embalmers saw the microclotting between 21 to 40% of their corpses. And 4 of the embalmers and funeral directors saw the coffee grounds, dirty blood, microclotting in 41 to 60% of their corpses. So again, this is at least a tripling of this phenomenon that they used to see prior to COVID and the vaccines. And as we talked
What
about,
I
this
don't
is dangerous.
understand, Tom, is why some of them don't even see it, because with all the deaths and injuries and everything going on, I don't understand how them 8 embalmers have not seen any.
Yeah, Richard Hirschman's always confused about that too, because like I said, Richard sees it, so often. So, but I have to take all the responses that I get, and I have to depend upon the embalmers and the funeral directors to answer the surveys honestly, right? So I take whatever answers I get, Tony, whether they're pro or con, because that's my job, is to be unbiased and collect data, right? So, and also, by the way, none of my surveys, the 3 worldwide surveys, nor this one, and any of the questions do I ever mention the words COVID or COVID vaccines. I only ask them, what are you seeing? When did you see it? How much are you seeing? What percentage of your corpses? These little notes like I have here on the bottom of the page, then I put those on the results after I do the survey. But those COVID and COVID vaccines do not appear in the questions. So next question we asked, this is a question we asked back in our middle survey, our annual survey, the 2023 survey. Some of the embalmers were telling me that they had seen an increase in infant deaths. This is very sad, right? And we know from scientific papers that the spike protein from the vaccine is getting in through from the mother to the child, unfortunately. They have found it in the delivered placentas. After women deliver the child in pregnancy, they deliver the placenta. They've examined those and found spike protein from the vaccine in those. We also know that there is spike protein being passed in the mother's breast milk to the child. So this could be a disastrous thing going on. So we asked the question, have you seen an increase in infant deaths, either at your funeral home or in your local morgue in 2025 compared to the year 2019 or prior? And 11 of the embalmers and funeral directors, 39%, said yes. So that's not a good thing. So then the next natural question is, okay, what percentage increase in infant deaths did you see in 2025 compared to the years 2019 and prior? And 14 of the embalmers funeral directors said they saw none, but there were 11 that said they saw between 1 to 20% increase, and then 3 said they saw between a 21 to 40% increase. So if you do a weighted average of all those, you get excluding the green bar. Do not include the green bar this time. So you see an increase. If you just do an average of the blue and the yellow bar, you get an average of 14% increase in infant deaths in 2025 compared to the pre-COVID years for just those that saw the increase. So but still, that's kind of alarming, isn't it? Yeah.
It's very alarming.
Yeah. A lot of funeral homes, some handle infant deaths more than others. There are some funeral homes that actually provide that service for free to a grieving couple. So the couples will tend to go to those funeral homes. Other funeral homes will charge, and they don't see many infant deaths because they charge money. So the parents go to a cheaper location. The last question we asked is, what age groups, check all that apply, did you see an increase in the number of clots of any type, whether it's white fibrous clots, microclotting, or the traditional grape jelly clots in 2025 when compared to the years 2019 and prior? This was kind of interesting. 2 embalmers said they saw none. None of them answered 0 to 5 or 6 to 20 years old, which I thought was interesting. Only 1 said 21 to 35 years old. But then look how it jumps. Starting with 36 to 50-year-olds, Tony, it jumps all the way up to 9. And then it's the biggest bars for the category 51 to 65-year-olds, 17. And then it actually starts to go down a little bit again to 10 embalmers saw between an increase in the 66 to 80-year-old category, and then just 2 at over 80 years old. What concerns me is that 36 to 50-year-old bar. That's a pretty long bar for people of that young an age and working, age that should not be having problems with strokes and heart attacks, right? What's interesting about this, Tony, is again, just like in our 2023 survey, when we asked this question, we saw bars starting to get long at the 36 to 50-year-old bar age group as well. And it dovetails very nicely with the work that Edward Dowd's been doing. He's been taking a look at this from a completely different angle, death and disability data in the insurance industry. And by looking at insurance company data, he saw a remarkable spike in death and disability in that age group, 36 to 50-year-olds, starting in the third quarter of 2021. Now, can you remember what was going on in the third quarter of 2021? Joe Biden here was mandating the vaccines on not just the U.S. military and government civilians and defense contractors, but he also tried to mandate it on any company in America that had more than 100 employees. And although our Supreme Court eventually shot that down, many of those companies acted preemptively, and they insisted that their employees take the COVID-19 vaccine. And sure enough, it was like a 100% rise in death and disability in that age group, maybe more than that. I'll have to go back and look at the numbers, but it was shocking, the spike in death and disability that took place in the third quarter of 2021 compared to all the previous quarters prior to that, and it persisted through the next year and a half. And Ed Dowd's got all that data, so this corroborates what Ed's findings are.
What's Donald Trump and Robert F. Kennedy going to do about this? Like, I don't see nothing to stop this.
We're disappointed right now. I guess we're aggressively optimistic. Myself, Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. Jordan Vaughn, media folks like Shannon Joy, others. We're pushing as hard as we can. Sasha Latapova is another one. We're pushing as hard as we can to get Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Marty McCary at the FDA, Jay Bhattacharya at the NIH to look at this information. And I'll be sending this slide deck to them and to the FDA, CDC, and NIH, the inner workings of people that work in the inside as well. Unfortunately, the last 3 years I've done my worldwide surveys, they've never responded to me once, Tony. They've never contacted me and say, hey, we'd like to, work with you and
no, not even once they responded to you.
No, the FDA responded to my people's blood clot survey that I did last fall of last year, and said basically, hey, rest assured we're looking at VAERS and VSafe and other systems, and we don't see a signal, but we'll let you know if we see a signal. Now, come on, man. There's all kinds of signals in VAERS and VSafe that there's all, not just with blood clots, but with myocarditis, miscarriages, nerve damage, turbo cancers. It's all there. And the fact that they're saying that they don't see a signal is it's negligence. It's actually criminal behavior, I think. So in this survey, like all our surveys, we have a open comments box. If the embalmers want to talk more about what they're seeing in the embalming room, we give them the opportunity to say so. We just received, out of the 28 responses, only 3 of them decided to fill this section out. And here's what their comments were. Comment 1, we have seen an increase in stillborn deaths. Most are around 19 weeks, which is kind of interesting. I'm not sure why that's happening, but yeah. Comment 2, saw several white fibrous structures clots in 2023 and 2024, but none this year. So in the back of that question where I saw, have you seen any in 2025, that person answered no, right? But that doesn't mean he hasn't seen them before. It just means he hasn't seen them yet this year. But have done less embalming this year than past few years. Also, we don't get a lot of infants. So as I told you, some funeral homes just don't get a lot of infants. And then the third comment was, I do not do very many embalmings or burials, so that's why I don't have many young people. So he's probably commenting on that last question, why, have you seen an increase in clotting in young people? He probably didn't have much evidence to go off of. But, in our 2023 survey, we did ask our embalmers, how many bodies do you embalm per year? The average was 100 per year. And we also asked them, how long have you been an embalmer? And the average in that survey, and that was a pretty good survey because we had 269 people respond to that survey. And of the 269 that responded, the average was 15 years of experience. So these guys and gals, they know what they're seeing, right? They know what the blood looked like in the years prior to COVID, 2019 and prior. They know what it looked like in the year of COVID, the virus, 2020. that we had the virus but no vaccines yet. And then they also know what the blood looks like since 2021 coming forward when we've had both the virus and the vaccine. So that's it for that particular one. Any questions about that particular survey before I go to the next one?
Tom, I do. I feel that there are a lot of funeral embalmers that are scared to say anything, to do surveys, and I'm surprised that many's actually done it.
Well, I think the reason they did is because they saw that I got invited by their president to come speak to them. So, and you bring up a good point, because in my 2023 survey, I was having a lousy time getting responses when I first put that survey out in via email to the 50 national, regional, state funeral director associations around the world, and also the 1,700 funeral homes around the world directly. You know, if everybody responds, I could probably get about 5,000 responses. But, you know, I've only gotten to several hundred these couple of years. But I called about 5 days after I had sent out my email with the link to the survey, because I only had like 14 responses in my Survey Monkey collectors. I said, this is terrible. I need more than this. So here in the United States, I had a list of the 30 U.S. state funeral director associations I had sent that survey to, and I had their phone number, contact. So I called them all up, and I talked to either their president or secretary or somebody else in their office. I said, hey, could you please forward my survey that I sent to you last week out to your active embalmer so they can take the survey? And God bless the Pennsylvania Funeral Directors Association. Miss Allison Hinkle, who works there, did exactly as I asked. And I know that happened because the next day, Tony, I got up and I had 93 responses in my Survey Monkey collectors, and they were all from Pennsylvania embalmers. And then I got the day after that, and I had 32 more responses, again, all from Pennsylvania embalmers. So it told me two things. It told me, first of all, the embalmers, they want to tell you what they're seeing in their corpses if they think they have the permission of their funeral director boss or the funeral home they work at, or their state funeral director association. Then they'll gladly tell. But remember, I sent that to 29 other U.S. state funeral director associations, and they didn't get that kind of response from them. So it tells me that there's a cover-up going on, a reluctance to want to take the survey. And I think one of the reasons why is if you're a funeral director association president, and they're funeral directors themselves, they elect one of their own as president. Well, if you're a funeral director, would you want to participate in a survey that might show a link between the COVID vaccine and these white fibrous clots and microclotting if you had mandated that all the people that work at your funeral home take the COVID-19 vaccine? You might be setting yourself up for a lawsuit, right? If one of your employees gets injured.
Well, that's why I don't think I've heard from any local funeral homes. Tom, I want to play a clip. It's from X. Sure. It's only a minute. It's only a minute.
That's fine. Go for it.
It's only a minute, and I just wanted to play this to get your thoughts. This is from Doc Malik.
Folks, I've come to the realization that every hero that we've been presented with is a fraud and is a fake. I mean, every hero that you see out there on the airwaves, getting time on the news, the TV, podcasts, pretty much you can write them off as frauds and fakes. And I'm going to lose some supporters and followers for what I'm going to say next, and I don't really care. You can bookmark this and save it, so I don't need to say I told you so. Trump is one of them. He's not one of us. You need to understand that he is putting together the control grid to enslave us all on behalf of the evil ones. He's not one of us. You really need to believe it. Put your trust in God. Put your trust in yourself. But don't put your trust in them.
And
folks, I've come to the realization.
I just had to, I had to play that, Tom, because I have my doubts about Donald Trump. Because murder is murder. Attempted murder is murder. And you know, I interviewed several vaccine injured on my show, and they're not being heard. It's like Robert F. Kennedy, that's one of his biggest things. And these guys need to get on the plate. We're going to be wiped out, Tom. We're going to be wiped out. The robots and AI is going to take over. It's guys like you getting the truth out. But I'm telling it as it is, Tom. I don't like what's going on of anything. We got a funeral home in our area. They're
Yeah.
expanding. Why are they expanding? And I happen to be
Business is good. A lot of people are dying in Western countries, not in Africa where was very low jab rates, but in Western countries where there was high vaccination rates.
Well, I have to be going jogging by, and I offered to give them some druthers and about Bill C-293. No, thank you. They just looked at me like terrified and they walked off. Well, they see my podcast because I send it, and they don't answer. They don't respond. I can't believe that they're doing this in Canada deliberately. They know this is going on. Like I had John Lohnes on the show several times. People are dying from these clot shots, and they're making money off it.
Yeah, and I understand where Doc Malik is coming from, because it is easy to lose faith, because we expected when RFK Jr. got in the chair at HHS that he would immediately take the COVID-19 vaccines off the market. He would immediately cancel the PrEP Act, things that he can do that are in his power. But the fact that he doesn't and hasn't yet, it's disappointing to those of us. And then you see the deflection to things like dyes in the food, fluoride in the water, and the focus is being taken off the vaccines. And you wonder why, because this is an immediate issue, these mRNA jabs, and the fact that Big Pharma's not stopping, and they've got they want to use this technology for everything going down the pipe, right? All the shots for shingles, RSV, the regular flu, bird flu. They've got a whole bunch of mRNA shots planned for everybody's future. And we just don't, we have good scientific evidence, as you know, that this is a very dangerous technology. It's not ready for prime time in humans. In fact, I don't think it'll ever be ready, because as I said, they cannot control the fact of where it goes in your body. It goes all over your body. They let the nanoparticles go everywhere. Basically the mRNA, they can't control what dosage amount you get of the thing, because if the mRNA persists and keeps producing the antigen, past the two days to a week that they want it to, and then about 10% of the time it's actually producing the wrong targeted protein. Instead of the 90% of the time it's producing the spike protein from the COVID virus, and that's dangerous enough as is. But 10% of the time it's producing these aberrant or nonsense proteins because of a problem called frame shifting, where our ribosomes are misreading the mRNA code from the vaccine. So they've lost on all three counts. They can't control where it goes. They can't control how long it lasts, and they can't even control the antigen that it produces 10% of the time. So it's just been a total failure, Tony. These things should be pulled off the market and thrown into the dustbin of history, never used again.
Dementia too, is it not? I see new information, and I'm hoping to get somebody on.
Right, and that's the connection with the clots, right? The clots are, amyloid material, which is just a fancy name for misshaped or misfolded protein. Well, misfolded proteins and this amyloid buildup, AMYLOID, is associated with neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Creutzfeldt-Jacobs, mad cow disease, dementia, So it's no wonder we've seen a huge increase in those as well. So what I want to do now is open up and give a trial run. This will be the first time I'm going to show a briefing that I'm going to give in about a month from now. I've been invited by a gentleman named G. Edward Griffin, and he's been around for decades. He's been fighting against communism, totalitarianism, and authoritarianism for 60 years, Tony. He was way back in the 1960s. He was warning about the infiltration of our institutions by communists. And boy, was he right. So
Tom, before you do, if you get a chance, you must watch the agenda. It shows step by step how this is being played out towards the end. Anyway, I'll let you.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I'll check it out. So I've been invited to speak on July 12th and 13th in Tulsa, Oklahoma by G. Edward Griffin about kind of my whole journey in this thing. And it's not so much about the results of the blood clot surveys as it is about the whole fear factor, how we were kind of played in a psyop, and what we as Canadians and American citizens need to do in the future in order to avoid that, right? In order to have the courage to say no when our governments try to do things to us to harm us. So the title of my speech is Why Doctors and Embalmers Fear to Speak About Deadly Vaccines and Killer Blood Clots. But an alternate title could just as easily be Courage is Contagious. It's time to draw your line in the sand, right? I don't know about you, Tony. This brings back a lot of horrors for me. Back in 2020, everybody was being told to mask up, 6 feet of distance. And they pointed their finger at you, too. If you were wearing your mask wrong or something like that, they made you put your mask on, didn't they? People hated you if you didn't want to wear a mask.
And if you had it below your nose, that was enough.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then they had stupid rules like, wear it into the restaurant, but once you sit down at the table, you can take it off. What is that all about?
That's so stupid.
It was just dumb. But then the tyranny got worse, right? In 2021, they started rolling those jabs out. And they didn't just roll them out and suggest that you take them. They coerced you into taking them, and they eventually mandated people into taking them. Or else, doctors, nurses, like I said, different company employees, military, you're going to lose your job if you don't take these jabs. And people had to make a decision. And a lot of people, unfortunately, in order just to be able to continue to work and get a paycheck, and I get it, you got to put food on your family's table, they decided to take the jab, didn't they?
And a lot of people have died and been injured.
Yeah. This is a photo of me in my Air Force Major's uniform with the lovely Mrs. Haviland there. By the way, my wife's from Kenya. And Kenya and countries in Africa, they have very little uptake of the COVID-19 vaccines. They've had no problems with excess mortality these last 4 years, unlike the Western countries that are highly jabbed. But I hung up my uniform many years ago. But back in 2021, I was working at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, and I was working in an F-16 shop. This is an F-16 fighter jet, and I was working on a really fun program. We were upgrading F-16s for the countries of South Korea and Singapore. I got to travel to those countries. Used to get to travel to Lockheed Martin's facility in Fort Worth, Texas, where they were putting new electronics on board the aircraft, getting it ready to fly in test ranges to make sure the new equipment was going to work properly. But then in October of 2021, specifically on October 13th, my D-Day came, Tony. This gentleman here he's a retired Lieutenant General Carl E. Schaefer. He's a 3-star Air Force general. There's 3 stars on each of those shoulders of his. And you see all the ribbons and badges and medals he has. But he was a coward that day. He actually forwarded an illegal order to the troops in October of 2021 to mandate the military, the government civilians, and us defense contractors working at the base to take the jab by a certain date or else get kicked out. And he also tried to guilt those of us who hadn't taken the jab yet into taking the jab. So I sent him back an email, Tony, and I said, shame on you. Remember, this is an Air Force 3-star general. I said, shame on you. You failed us. Instead of standing up for our right to decide for ourselves whether or not to take an experimental drug, you chose to spend your time trying to guilt us into taking the jab. Shame on you. And I didn't just send the email to him. I CC'd all 30,000 people that work at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. So I knew what was going to happen. I got a call a half hour later from my defense contractor boss, and I was fired from a $165,000 a year job as an engineer and data analyst for shaming the Air Force 3-star general in front of the entire base. But somebody had to do it. When I sent that email, I also attached a document that explained why I will not comply with the COVID vaccine mandate. And basically it was based on the fact that I had already been looking at the data. Our CDC wasn't putting out any good data, but Public Health England, UK Health Security Agency, they were putting out good information showing hundreds of thousands of breakthrough cases of COVID amongst the fully vaccinated in the early fall of 2021. But despite that fact, Joe Biden put out the mandates, and they were telling you on the TV, this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated, when they knew it was a complete lie. The England data proved that otherwise.
Well, they lied about everything, Tom, everything.
Yes. And then also we knew it was just unethical, right? We knew about the Nuremberg Code. You need to give voluntary consent, to have informed consent. Well, people had neither. They didn't have, couldn't give voluntary consent because
can't you sue the Air Force for this? This is ridiculous.
No, because I was technically fired for insubordination because I embarrassed a 3-star in front of the entire base. So I technically was not fired because I didn't take the jab. I was fired because I was insubordinate. And I would do it all again, Tony, in a heartbeat. Like I said, these colonels and generals were all cowards. They were all just, kowtowing to the illegal order that they had been given from above. None of them pushed back. Not a single one of them that I know of.
They got to start pushing back or we'll have no humanity left.
Well, what was nice is, a couple of months ago, Pete Hegseth came out and said that was indeed an illegal order. He confirmed that it was an illegal order that was given back in 2021 to mandate you to take this experimental drug.
Well, they should be held accountable for it, every one of them.
Yeah, and I think so too. I think they should lose their retirements, be busted down, these colonels and generals. And then, of course, all the troops that were kicked out have been invited back in. Very few of them are coming back in. And I don't blame them. Would you want to go back to work with all the people that threw you under the bus? I wouldn't. So what I did after I got fired from my job, I just went into early retirement, Tony. And for the next year, from the fall of 2021 through the fall of 2022, I stood on a busy street corner with a sign saying no vax mandate. That's me in the middle with my sunglasses there holding my no vax mandate sign. And with this is taken in Washington, D.C., we were heading down to the Lincoln Memorial. This is the Washington Monument. We were going to the Lincoln Memorial to hear the speeches during the Defeat the Mandates D.C. that took place in a very cold day in January of 2022. But I came back to Dayton, Ohio, and I held that sign for over 120 days from the fall of 2021 through the fall of 2022 at a very busy street corner. Had like 4 lanes of traffic each way, 2 turn lanes, an Arby's, a Red Lobster, a Best Buy, Olive Garden, Walmart, big, busy intersection. And I got a chance to talk to people. I had a megaphone with me too, and I would try to convince moms not to jab up their kids. I talk about anything that was happening that particular week in the news, like, more soccer players dropping dead on the pitch, that kind of thing. So, and we saw a lot of that, right? Remember scenes like this you can see the body laying back down here in the corner, and then the, perfectly healthy super athletes, right? These guys in their young 20s running around on the soccer field, all of a sudden just healing over with a heart attack. We knew something was up, right?
How can anyone not question this?
I know. It was happening with regularity. It wasn't like, these things have happened. Yeah, they happened sparsely in the past, but these were happening, 10 times as much in 2021 as they ever had in any year previous to that.
The excess death rates rose since 2019.
I know but the CDC and FDA and our governments were keeping that information hidden from us, and they still are to this day. But things changed for me then when I watched that movie Died Suddenly in the fall of 2022. That movie, changed everything for me, because that's when I saw that hour-long documentary. About half the movie involves those 6 or 7 embalmers, including Richard Hirschman, John O'Looney, Laura Jeffries, and others. They were seeing these unusual white fibrous clots in their corpses. So then that prompted me to contact my own Ohio Embalmers Association, who said they were seeing these too. And, in the movie, this is what you see, right? You see these kind of clots being pulled out of corpses. There's another example. Look at that one. Look how horrible that one is. So all the, that was all shown in the film. So what I did the very next day, I watched that movie the night it premiered in the week of Thanksgiving here in the U.S., November of 2022, that Monday. The very next day, Tuesday, I called this organization, the Ohio Embalmers Association. They're located in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I live in Dayton, about an hour north. And I talked to 3 other gentlemen, and I found out that their vice president, Mr. Woody Wilson, who is actually now their president of the Ohio Embalmers Association, Woody said, Tom, I'm seeing the white fibrous clots too. So I said, wow, now I have a well-respected man in the industry, right? Now president of the Ohio Embalmers Association, corroborating these 6 or 7 embalmers in this Died Suddenly movie. So right there and then I decided to do a nationwide survey, which then I later on turned into a worldwide survey, including Canada, UK, and Australia, and New Zealand.
What about Canada, Tom? What are you hearing from Canada, from embalmers?
Well, we hear mostly from Laura Jeffries. Now, I did get a communication early on from Kevin Swire, who's the president of the Manitoba, Canada Funeral Service Association for the entire province of Manitoba. Kevin has his funeral home in Winnipeg, and he said, yeah, Tom, I'm seeing the clots too. So we have confirmation from him, president of the Manitoba Funeral Service Association, that he's seen the clots.
Anything out of Nova Scotia?
Probably some survey results out of Nova Scotia, but I don't have those at my fingertips. But I'm sure they're happening all across the country.
Oh.
Laura Jeffries, can vouch for that. And in fact, Laura and I both testified as part of the National Citizens Inquiry that was done, over the last year or two. So we both have given testimony to the panel there for the results that we got from Canada. So then that led me to do the surveys, and just a couple slides here. Like I said earlier, when we did our latest worldwide survey, 250 of the 300 embalmers that responded, 83% said they were still seeing the clots through the end of the year 2024. And they were seeing them, you look there in red, in an average of 27.5% of their corpses. Look over there on the left, 74 of the embalmers said they saw the white fibrous clots between 21 to 40% of their corpses. 55 of the embalmers said they were seeing the clots between 41 to 60% of their corpses. 23 embalmers were seeing the clots between 61 to 80% of their corpses. Again, like I said, this is not a rare phenomenon. And these embalmers with 20 or 30 years of experience never saw this phenomenon before the years of COVID or the vaccines.
Do they explain how they think they were made or where they come from?
They can't, because that's not their job, right? They're just embalmers. Their job is to get a body dressed and ready for a funeral, for a viewing, and get the formaldehyde in and the blood out. So that, as you know, is a scientific question. We know the answer to that, right? Greg Harrison, Dr. Kevin McKernan, they're looking at that from a scientific standpoint, and they have good, solid evidence that indeed the spike protein, either from the virus or from the vaccine, is causing these white fibrous clots. So they're both culprits, and they have one thing in common, the damaging spike protein. In addition, the vaccines, you get a double whammy because the phospholipid nanoparticles are also contributing. So why won't funeral directors and embalmers speak out? This is a weird thing. One of the organizations I've tried to contact for 3 years now is the British Institute of Embalmers. I cannot get them to take my survey, Tony. They just refuse to take it. And here's a letter from them.
Why?
Because he said, where is it at? We're a small institute and do not have the staff to cope with sending out numerous outside items. Now, all she had to do was take the email I sent to her and forward it to their membership and have the link to the survey embedded in it. So telling me they don't have the staff to do this is just a ridiculous thing to say, right? And I can understand they say, well, I'm not an official person. I'm just a retired U.S. Air Force major. Well, that's fine. Okay. Do your own survey, right? These people, in fact, on their website for the British Institute of Embalmers, they have a code of ethics. And key point number 4 of their code of ethics is whenever they see something unusual in embalming, they're supposed to do research in that area. Well, they're violating their very own code of ethics. We know it's affecting embalming. It's increasing the time it takes to do an embalming from about an hour to an hour and a half to now about 2 to 2.5 hours. So I'm sure it's frustrating for them, but it's just it's silly. And I think that, like I said, they're violating their very own code of ethics by not taking the survey. We already talked about the strange case of Pennsylvania. Like I said, in 2023, in just 2 days, I got 125 responses after their secretary forwarded out my email with the survey link to it. So we know that the embalmers are willing to tell you if they think they have permission from their funeral director association. What was really bizarre, though, Tony, is the following year, this last year, 2024, that organization refused to take my survey. So I lost all 125 of the responses. I didn't get, and I got 0 responses from their Funeral Director Association this year, despite the fact that their own president, Mr. Chris Calvi Jr., sent me an email back in November of 2024 saying, Tom, I'm having a devil of a time trying to get fluid from the elbows down into people's hands. When you're embalming, you want the head to look good, and you also want the hands to look good because those are visible a lot of times in the casket when it's open. So, but Chris said he's having trouble getting fluid into the hands of people. Obviously, there's something blocking it, clotting. So, despite the fact that he's seeing that, their board decided not to forward the survey to their embalmers to take this year. Very strange, isn't it? Like
Very strange. Maybe they were told not to take it, or else.
Yeah, somebody might have got to them, or like I said, they might be worried about liability if these, funeral directors who are part or senior leadership had mandated the people in their funeral homes take the jabs, right? If somebody winds up getting injured and it's linked to the jab because of the survey, then all of a sudden they could be liable for. So.
I think there's a lot liable on all levels, even the churches, Tom.
Yeah. So the embalmers, like I said, we allow them to comment anonymously to the survey. And as I mentioned earlier, we never mention the words COVID or COVID vaccines in any of our questions or instructions to the survey. But despite that fact, a lot of the embalmers talk about the vaccines. I'll read a couple of them here. So I've been an embalmer since the early 2000s for an embalming service. I've never seen anything like this before the spring of 2021. I've experienced the white fibrous clots that have stretched out to 20 inches. It's like battling a rubber band. My right hand and elbow has suffered from these clots. I've been saying for the last 3 years, this isn't normal. I've recently spoken with a physician that has been hearing this in his field. We are in the same agreement in that we feel we know where this has come from. I think he's talking in that last sentence about the vaccine without saying it. Here's a couple more. Idaho. Sometimes I'm given the information about if someone has had a certain vaccine. Sometimes I'm aware that they've had 5 or 6 doses of it. These are the people that we are seeing with the abnormal clots or significant amount of clots. From Virginia. I'm finding a lot of white rubbery clots and had been taking pictures of them, but it's become the new normal. I don't use a drain tube anymore because of all the clots, blood clots and the fibrous white ones. My angular forceps is my go-to instrument to help remove them. That's how much he has to stop and pick them out. Here's another one from Canada. This guy has a little bit of an opposite opinion. Says, since the very beginning of COVID-19 pandemic, I assume this survey is pertaining to, I have not noticed any clots, fibrous structures, or contents in the blood outside the ordinary. It is also not our responsibility as embalmers to take note of these cases, record or share any information, as it is confidential medical information that breaches the privacy clause we have with our client families. Videos and articles such as died suddenly are anti-vaccine, COVID-denying propaganda that is based in no actual fact other than to spread right-wing beliefs and fear-mongering the public. Remember, I didn't mention COVID or vaccines in any of the questions. So this guy's got something on his mind, doesn't he? And I take issue with what he said about it's not his responsibility. When an embalmer finds something like a gunshot wound or a stab wound in a corpse, he's legally obligated to tell the authorities, the police, about that. Similarly, I think the embalmer should have an ethical duty when they find something unusual like these white fibrous clots. They should also tell authorities about that as well, right? Something unusual.
They should be reporting it.
Yeah, and also you can do it in such a way that you don't have to reveal that the clot came out of Mrs. Smith or Mr. Jones, right? So you don't have to reveal the identity of the person. You can just say it came out of a male age, in his 50s, or a female in her age 70s, and that kind of thing.
I don't recall you giving any names out over your surveys at all.
No, we don't. Exactly. So, okay, now let's get into doctors that don't want to speak publicly about it. It's not just the embalmers. In America has lost trust in their doctors. Prior to the pandemic, about 70% of Americans actually trusted their doctors and their hospital systems. That dropped during the pandemic to 40%, Tony. It was almost cut in half, and deservedly so. You know, people are going in with conditions. They're getting gaslit. They're being told, it's anything but the vaccine. So I can understand why people have lost their faith in the hospital systems and their doctors. Speaking of doctors, I was contacted back in March of 2024 by this gentleman, Dr. Mohammed Basharat. He's an endovascular specialist and cardiologist in Jacksonville, Florida. And he admitted to me that he's been removing the same white fibrous clots, which he calls devious clots, in living people for the last 4 years in what's called a catheterization lab, a cath lab. And what he does is he uses flexible catheters that either suck the clot out, they scrape it out, or they actually lasso and pull the clot out. And he's seeing a lot of these white fibrous clots these days. He actually, in one of his emails to me, he sent me this photograph. This on the right there is a white fibrous clot before it's cleaned off. It's, when it first comes out, it's covered in blood. But after that gets rinsed off, you see that cord running down through the middle of it? That cord, you can see parts of it like right here, here, and then on up here. That'll turn into a white fibrous clot or tannish looking clot after the blood's cleaned off. Over on the left here, there's angiograms of what it looked like when it was still in the leg. Here, when it was in the leg, you can see the blood flow goes up to this point here and then stops, this darker area. And then after he removed the clot, then you have this nice dark stream all the way up through, which is telling him that that blood vessel is now clear and now blood's able to flow through there again. So that was a successful surgery that he performed. He also, one of his friends, colleagues, Dr. Dan McDyer, who's an OBGYN, who's been seeing tremendous carnage in pregnant women, premenopausal women, postmenopausal women, unusual bleeding, miscarriages. He describes as carnage. He sent me a couple more of Dr. Basharat's photographs as well. This one's a clot that came out of the iliac vein, which is down in your pelvis area. Again, you can see grape jelly clotting mixed in with these more lighter color, more fibrous, tough material. Here's another one. This is out of the lung area. This is what's called a saddle PE. PE stands for a pulmonary embolism. These can be quite dangerous. These can actually kill you. So again, up here in this upper left-hand corner, you can see it's lighter colored, more fibrous looking material, not your typical grape jelly type clot at all. So extremely dangerous, these fibrous clots. What's interesting is just about a month after I was first contacted by Dr. Basharat, he sent me this email. Look at this, Tony. Tom, I was instructed to immediately terminate all communications in this regard. Apologies for the inconvenience.
Wow.
So somebody in his hospital system got to him. You're not going to talk about this or else we'll come after your license. We'll take your license away. We'll take your board certifications away. So he, out of fear, he stopped communicating with me instead of revealing this important information to the world. Dr. Philip McMillan runs a YouTube channel in the UK called Vegan Health. And he's found his own cath lab whistleblower, another gentleman, also from the United States. And this doctor has been working in the same cath lab for 20 years. And he's been removing anywhere between 3 to 10 of these white fibrous clots per week out of patients in his one cath lab alone. Unlike the embalmers, this guy has access to the COVID vaccination records of all his patients. He can tell you how many shots they took, when they took their shots, which brand they took. And he says that 99% of the time when he finds the white fibrous clots, that person's been jabbed with anywhere between 1 to 8 jabs, and the more jabs they've taken, the worse the clotting seems to be. He also, though, started going dark on Dr. McMillan and doesn't contact him anymore. Somebody must have got to him, too, and told him not to speak about this at fear of losing his job. So based upon those 2 cath lab whistleblowers, I decided to do another survey that I did for vascular surgeons, cardiologists, endovascular specialists to talk about clotting in the living. And I actually included some questions on this survey, unlike the embalmers one, about, are the patients that you're finding the white fibrous clots in, did they take the COVID-19 vaccine? Well, I tried to get the societies for vascular surgery in the United States, Canada, UK, and Australia and New Zealand to take the survey. I also sent it out to over 120 vascular surgeons across the United States. Tony, I got 0 responses. Zero.
Zero. None.
Zero. None of the vascular surgeons wanted to talk about it. None of the societies did. The U.S. Society for Vascular Surgery sent me back this email. They're located in Rosemont, Illinois, and they brag on having over 6,300 member vascular surgeons across the United States, but they didn't want to send the survey out to the, and they don't want to, again, they're violating their own mission statement. They should be investigating things that are unusual in the area of vascular surgery. They should be looking at them themselves. If they don't want to take my survey, they should be doing their own. And like I said, the CDC and the FDA are not doing surveys with these organizations either. So it's left to a retired U.S. Air Force major to do it for them.
I think it's a cover-up, don't you think?
Absolutely. You can't find a problem if you don't go looking for it. They just don't want to go look for the problem. The interesting thing is patients are happy to talk publicly about their blood clotting experience. I said, if I can't get good information from the doctor in, maybe I can get it from the patient in. So I created a people's blood clot survey where I asked people that had blood clotting issues since January of 2020 to respond about their issues. And I advertised on Dr. John Campbell's YouTube channel, the older gentleman from England, has a big YouTube channel. And also Clayton Morris and his wife Natalie on Redacted News. I advertised on there, a QR code. And we got responses from all over the world. I got 1,400 responses in just 2 weeks, Tony. So, like I said, the patients are happy to tell you about their blood clotting experience. Here's one of the results they had is we asked them, what years have you or the person you know have these blood clotting issues? As you see in 2020, the year we had COVID, only 79 people said they had their blood clotting issue that year. Well, look how the bar jumps up to over 500 starting in year 2021 after the rollout of the COVID vaccines. What's this chart telling you? It's telling me that it appears to be a COVID vaccine problem because of the tremendous jump in the clotting issues starting in 2021 after the jabs rolled out.
It appears to be that way, doesn't it?
Yeah. One of the other questions we asked in that survey is, what part of the body are you experiencing clotting issues? And legs was the number one answer, followed by lungs, followed by brain, then heart, then abdomen. Then we had a catch-all for others like nose, eye, arms, uterus, etc. What's interesting about this is it matches perfectly the CDC's own vSafe information. They have two systems. They have VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, but the CDC also had another system called vSafe, which is a downloadable app that people can download on their smartphones, talk about their clotting experience. And 10 million Americans downloaded that app and reported, and of those 10 million, 800,000 of them, Tony, 8%, had a severe event that was bad enough they either had to go to urgent care, the emergency room, or schedule a doctor's appointment to resolve the issue. So that tells you how bad the vaccines are. 8% of people who took the vaccine that reported here actually had a bad enough event they had to do that. What was interesting is the CDC did not, there was a free text data field in that information, and the CDC did not want to release that to the public. But Del Bixby and his folks at the Informed Consent Action Network called ICANN, no, they went did a FOIA for that, and they got a judge to make the CDC turn that information over. So they've been reporting it to ICANN in the form of Excel spreadsheets. Every month they come out with an Excel spreadsheet with hundreds of thousands of records until they get to the 10 million. And guess what, Tony? In the CDC's own vSafe free text data field, when I go through those and look at those Excel spreadsheets, and I do a search on the term blood clot, and I write down where the blood clot occurred. Legs is the number one answer, followed by lungs, followed by brain, followed by heart. So the batting order matches perfectly the 1,400 people that responded to this survey. So that gives me great confidence the people answering this survey that we're looking at were doing so honestly and accurately, because, like I said, the batting order of where the clot's occurring matches perfectly the CDC's own information out of their own vSafe database.
I wonder how many people that have all these issues that don't even realize it, that it's from the clot shot.
You think about it, right? People
There's a lot. I see it around.
Because the doctors won't tell them. You're right. And here's some proof. I'm glad you mentioned that. That was a perfect lead into these next couple slides. So we had some couple of comments to this survey from inside the industry. This one's from a surgical nurse. She says, surgical nurse seeing a huge increase in clots. We're doing more amputations than I've seen in my whole career. I'm definitely seeing the clots you're describing. When I say it's probably due to the COVID shot, everyone ignores me and there's silence in the operating room. I also hear the surgeons saying, I've never seen this before. Also, during heart surgeries, the surgeons are having difficult time suturing as the tissues are just falling apart. Once again, the surgeons are saying, I've never seen anything like this before. A lot of patients are dying. Wait till you get a load of this one. It says, I was feeling fine, and then had pain left side below shoulder blade. Started sweating and feeling weak. Called the ambulance. ECG did not show heart attack. Rushed to emergency. ECG did not show heart attack. Third different emergency. Doctor did an ECG and an ultrasound. They were all perplexed. A cardiologist was called. I went to a heart institute. Arriving there, I went into cardiac arrest. Was out 2 minutes. 3 sets of compressions and 4 defibrillator shocks were used. They went in through an artery at the wrist. They removed fibrous clot. They did not want to tell me, but a nurse whispered to me, it's the vaccine. We have so many. Follow-up appointment with a cardiologist. I asked the question directly. The doctor looked down and said, I cannot talk about it at the risk of losing my job. You see now why people have lost confidence in their doctors and the hospital system? This is sick, isn't it? This is terrible.
Sick. These doctors are scared they're going to get killed for talking. So
or lose their careers. Maybe not get killed, but lose their career. Right?
Tom, I think it's that serious. They want to depopulate the world. So if they're willing to kill people with vaccines, they're willing to murder you any which way they can.
Here's one thing that's really been discouraging. I have had some good luck in getting on shows like Full Measure with Cheryl Atkinson. She does a nationally syndicated TV show here in the United States. It appears on weekends. It's a half-hour show. Richard Hirschman and I did appear on that show and talked about the clotting issue. I've also been on Del Bigtree's The High Wire, where I've talked about that as well. And I also did about an hour-long sit-down with Jan Jekielek of the Epic Times. So those are probably 3 of my largest interviews. But I have not been able to get on shows like Tucker Carlson or Joe Rogan or with big people like Glenn Beck, has a huge radio show across the United States. They don't want to touch me.
What about Alex Jones?
Alex will. Alex has done an interview with me. Yeah. But Tucker, this is last fall in September, I actually traveled to Hershey, Pennsylvania. And you see, I'm presenting a vial of Class 2 Tucker. I gave that to him to keep. I gave another vial to his producer, Samantha, but I have not heard back from Tucker to get an interview about the clots, which is the most spectacular side effect of the COVID-19 vaccines. I mean, it's the only one you can really see, right? That's what makes it so spectacular. So it's, I expect this from the left, from the mainstream media to ignore this, but it's a bitter pill to swallow when you have to see censorship from your own side.
So my question would lead, is some of these people on our side paid opposition? Going back to that little clip I played you for an example.
Yeah.
We think people are on our side that are not, something? Sometimes you don't always have to be big. It's like someone said to me, well, some people don't want to go on with you, Tony, because they don't have the views like Tucker. But all it takes is one person that watched that podcast to tell another 100 people and another 100 people to tell that 100 people. And it has a ripple effect.
Right.
And we have great views in the winter. We got a lot of people that's on our Facebook page. We have over 2,000. Like, we don't have the numbers like Tucker, but people got to share, Tom. We had a lot of good guests on, including you. And like I said, Tucker, he could be paid opposition. Why will he not have you on to talk about these clots?
What's strange is about a month ago, he had Clayton Morris from Redacted on. Clayton went to his Tucker's cabin, and they had about an hour and a half interview. And twice during that interview, Clayton Moore's mentioned the white fibrous clots because I've been on Clayton's show about 2 or 3 times talking about this issue. So Clayton's well aware of it, and God bless him for having me on his show. But both times when Clayton mentioned the white fibrous clots during that interview, Tucker just acted like he didn't know about it, or he didn't, he could have mentioned, oh yeah, I know all about that because I met this guy last September who gave me a vial of these clots to me and my producer, but he stayed quiet about it. Really bizarre. Yeah.
Why do you think he's not putting you on? Like, this is big news.
Do you think there might be a gag order from the Trump administration that you're not to talk about this? The people on the right in the media maybe have been given instructions, because this is one of the most damning of the side effects against the vaccines. And as you know, Donald Trump has never come out and disavowed the vaccines. He still thinks that he saved hundreds of millions of people with the vaccines, even though he didn't mandate them. But people are starting to get fed up with that position. About a month or two ago, John Rich, the famous country western singer, he was at a dinner sitting right next to Trump, and Trump turned to him and said, and you watch the video where John Rich explains this. He turns to John Rich. He said, "John Rich, can I ask you a question?" He said, "Sure, Mr. President." He says, "How come at my rallies, when I bring up the COVID vaccine, the crowd boos?" And John Rich said, "Well, I'd boo you too if you brought it up, because did you know these vaccines are entering and killing lots of people?" And it kind of, the president, it took him aback a little bit. And I don't think since then, he has been talking about the vaccines at any of his rallies or public appearances.
Well,
so
how could he not know, Tom? How could he not know? Like, I hear a lot of it. Probably 8 out of 10 people. We have a locals paper up here called Druthers. I'm not sure if you heard tell that. I may make a suggestion why I'm talking to you. If you submit an article to Druthers, they may put it in. And actually, that would be a good route for you, because that is delivered all across Canada. It's people donate to it.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of people look at Druthers. So that would be a good way to get your message.
Send me the information for that, Tony, and I'll write up something. So getting back to what the very beginning, what are we going to do? What are you going to do next time? This is, are we going to next time let them shove us around, make us wear masks? Are you going to take experimental drugs against your will?
No.
Exactly.
No.
Here's one of the reasons why you shouldn't. This is actually a microscopic view of the embalmer's white fibrous clots at a magnification level of 5,000 times. And that's not the way fibrinogen is supposed to look. It's supposed to look nice and smooth like spaghetti noodles. This looks all twisted and bumpy, and it's got nodules all over it. And then what happens is that clot is almost impossible to break down. So then it tends to grow and persist, and it becomes these things in your body.
It's disgusting.
It is. We have a good example of somebody who actually stood up against the medical tyranny. Remember this guy? Novak Djokovic, world's probably greatest tennis player of all time. He's won more Grand Slam events. I think he's won 24, Wimbledon's, U.S. Opens, Australian Opens, and French Opens, more than any other tennis player in history. And I went and saw him in August of 2023. He had been banned from playing in countries like Australia and the United States for about a year and a half at that time, because he refused to take the COVID-19 vaccine. And they said, they interviewed him and said, "Novak, you're at the prime of your career. You're missing all these Grand Slam tournaments. Why are you doing this?" And he said, "Because, I'm very careful about what goes into my body. I don't want to take this vaccine." So I found out he was going to play for the first time in about a year and a half in America, in Cincinnati, in August of 2023. So I paid some really top dollar to get a really good seat, only 5 rows up, right behind the baseline and right in the middle of the court. I wore the shirt, the red shirt said "Pure Shot by Pure Blood," and I brought with me a shirt that said Novak. Instead of Novak, N-O-V-A-K, how he spells his name. See how I spelled it? Novak Djokovic is his own man. And so after the match was over, I presented that to Novak, and he signed that shirt. And it's down there by the O. You can kind of faintly see his signature. But what I did after that match was over, and he won the match. He actually went on to win that tournament, defeated number one in the world, Carlos Alcaraz. And then the very next month, he went on to win the U.S. Open, another Grand Slam title. Ironically, that tournament was sponsored by Moderna. and he won the tournament. So, but I went after he signed that shirt. I went around the entire inside of the stadium, and then I went around the outside of the stadium and all through the food court area for about the next half hour, holding up that shirt, saying, "See, Novak likes this shirt." You know, they made him sit for 2 years because of this stupid COVID jab, but Novak proved that he'd rather fight for freedom than chase after trophies. And what was interesting is, there were thousands of people at this tennis complex. They were playing matches all over the complex, and nobody else had signs like that. They had signs like "We love you, Novak," but nobody was admitting that we had wronged this man for 2 years by kicking him out of the United States just because he didn't take the jab. So I wanted to know that I was apologizing on behalf of my country. So after about a half hour, I collected about 5 or 6 security people behind me. My sister was with me. So they asked me, they said, "Sir, you're disturbing the other patrons. We're going to have to ask you to leave." So I said, "Okay, I'll leave," because I had pretty much gone around everybody in the complex had seen it by that time. So I left the complex. So my mission was accomplished. But I wanted to put it in the face of those people, old and young, that were attending that tournament, that there were consequences here, right? This man had been wronged, and we actually owed him an apology. But everybody was pretending, Tony, like nothing was happened, like this, everything's just fine. We all just want to forget about it. I don't like that. People need to apologize for what they did to people like Novak Djokovic and other people who were unvaccinated, who lost their jobs, and people that got injured, like you say, or family members of people who got killed by the jabs. Apologies are still due to these people.
Well, I remember in a post someone said that we got to stop going down these rabbit holes, and why should we stop? Why should we forget murder, attempted murder, like it's nothing, and people injured and suffering in the lockdowns? People's bank accounts were frozen up in here in Canada. I think there was a court case that was just one up here in Canada by one of the truckers. Like they had every right to protest. Like we all got to start using our own brains to think for ourselves and not let others do it for us. We need to get that message across to everybody. Look at both sides. Wow, what Tom presented to us today on this podcast.
Yeah, you're right. And Tony, people have to get their priorities straight, right? Is your job, is it worth taking an experimental drug against your will to keep your job? I mean, you can always get another job, but you only have one body. And once an injection goes into you, it's never coming out again. So if there's anything wrong with it, if it does anything to you, like I said, that's your one and only body that God gave you.
Well,
So to me, it was a no-brainer. I would always choose protecting my body over employment.
Well, Tom, don't they have protocols to get the spike protein out of bodies?
Yeah, they do. I mean, Dr. Peter McCullough suggests a protocol of nattokinase, bromelain, curcumin. You can go to his wellness company website and get the suggested dosage amounts, daily dosage amounts, any warnings on those. You can also buy those. Those are natural supplements. You can get those on Amazon so that you don't need a prescription for them.
Me wondering, aren't these made by pharmaceutical companies also?
Well, yeah, I mean, the natural health ones are a little bit, they're not, I don't think, as corrupted as the big pharma companies, right? They're putting out the prescription medications that they try to make you take. So that will help you keep, detox your body of the spike protein. The problem is once these white fibrous clots have formed, we've found nothing so far that can break them down. That's why the doctors, those cath lab doctors, have to go in and physically remove them using flexible catheters, or else vascular surgeons actually have to go in and remove them by slicing open a vein or artery as well. So and the unfortunate thing is, as I mentioned earlier, is the vaccine, mRNA vaccines, seem to be producing the spike protein indefinitely, maybe forever in somebody's body. So you may have to continually or periodically detox yourself of the spike protein. There was a case of a nurse. She took the McCullough protocol. She cleared the spike protein completely out of her body. Hooray! She came back about 2 or 3 months later. Spike protein was present again. So she said, oh, I'm a spike protein factory, right? Despite the fact she got rid of the spike protein that was in her body, the mRNA that was still in the cells was still producing new spike protein. So she just filled right up again.
What about unvaxxed?
Unvaxxed, we know that they're still possibly susceptible to shedding. We know that's a real phenomenon from talking to Dr. Pierre Corey and his medical partner, Dr. Scott Marsland. They have cases, they treat people in their clinic for both COVID vaccine injury and for long COVID as well. They will tell you about 70% of their patients are vaccine injured patients, but about 30% of their patients have not taken the COVID vaccine. They've been shed on, or they have a problem with they came from the virus itself.
I could have that in me as well.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you another question before I forget. You were talking about the tennis player and what he went through.
Yeah.
And all the different sports, people in sports like soccer. What about NHL hockey? I haven't heard, me personally, I haven't heard anybody that's dropped from the jab or anything during a hockey game.
I don't know how intensely the NHL demanded their players. Here in the States, NBA was very demanding. There were a few players that held out. One was Kyrie Irving, who held out and just said, no, I'm not taking the jab. In pro football, Aaron Rodgers didn't take the vaccine. Now, some of the ones that said they took the vaccine, I'm very suspicious about. Tom Brady, for example, at the time. Tom is very particular about what he puts in his body. Now, he never said anything one way or the other about taking the vaccine. The NFL made it sound like all the players, with the exception of just a couple, did not, all of them took the vaccine. But my suspicion is that there's no way that Tom Brady took that vaccine. I'm thinking that a lot of these people actually got fake vaccine cards, or their teams never really pushed hard to make them prove that they had taken the vaccine. So, and that's, and we hear about that with a lot of the elites, the politicians. There was even a case of somebody that was she was high up in the CDC, and I think she was pregnant at the time that the vaccines came out. And she decided, because she was pregnant, she wasn't going to take the COVID-19 vaccine. At the same time, her organization is recommending them for all pregnant women across the United States. So there's this whole, do as I say, not as I do, right? So,
you know something, Tom? This could all end if all the vaccine injured would come out and talk on podcasts like this. If all the funeral embalmers, besides John Looney and Richard Hirschman, and a few of them, would all come on, that this would end. This would end like quick.
Exactly. And that's what I'm going in my last part of my speech I'm going to give in Tulsa next month. That's exactly what I'm going to say. We have to do a better job next time of standing up and saying that magic word, no. Whenever tyranny is trying to be put on you by the government, you do have a right to say no. And if enough of us stand together and say no, we can push back on this, right? So it's unfortunate, like I said, here in the States, 80% of American adults over the age of 18 took at least the first 2 jabs back in 2021. So, it was only about 20% of American adults over 18 that withstood that and didn't take it. Now, thankfully, I think most children did not take it. So that's good. But
you do realize Canada's become pretty well all communists. And if the Americans don't smarten their own country up, you're going to have a full-fledged communist country next door to you up here in Canada. Bill C-293, Bill C-2, just a number of bills that they're pushing through Parliament. Bill C-293 they're expected to introduce where they can come take our land. No meat or no dairy by 2030. This is just totally outrageous. People died in friggin' wars for us to be free. People, you need to speak the hell up and And come on, I'm not just talking my podcast. I'm talking about any podcaster should put you on. Uh, have Tom Haviland on. You we want this foolishness to end. This has been going on too long, Tom. Too many people are dying and being injured. The vaccine injured. It's upsetting. I had two on my last show, two vaccine injured. My heart goes out because they stood up. They spoke. But
Yes.
there's so many.
And remember, and they did supposedly the right thing by taking the vaccine, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like they're anti-vaxxers. They took the vaccine. That's why they're injured.
They
Yeah.
took it, and they're spilling their hearts. And what they want is other vaccines to come and talk. And I know it ain't easy. It wasn't easy for me starting this, but
Right.
I feel that vaccine killed my mother, my aunt, a good many people around me, a lot of people, Tom, I know. And I know I'm keeping you well over.
No, you hit on a really good point, Tony, because we had two epidemics going on. We had the COVID virus, which was unleashed on us, and we also had the vaccines that were unleashed on the public too. So, but then we had a third epidemic, and that was an epidemic of cowardice. A cowardice by embalmers, funeral directors, doctors, the media, politicians, and the general public. Like you said, not wanting to talk about this, wanting to move on. Even the people that got duped, nobody likes to admit that they got fooled, and people have quietly stopped taking the vaccine, but those same people have not been speaking out about saying, you know what, I made a mistake. I'm not going to do it next time. I won't fall for it next time. I'll be smarter next time. So they just whistle along the graveyard and they pretend like everything's fine. Let's move on past this. And that's pride. That's pride. Of not wanting to admit that you were duped and made a mistake. People need to admit a mistake, or else they're going to set themselves up next time for another mistake. And it might not be another pandemic. It might be something like central bank digital currency they get fooled on. It might be 15-minute cities, or like you say, climate change, where now we have to start eating bugs instead of being able to eat meat and dairy. People need to stand up and understand and be skeptical about the things that are being thrust upon us. And like I said, have the courage to say no and tell others, not just say it for yourself, but tell others as well. Try to form a majority that can push back on these, because there are a small minority of elites that are, leading the rest of us and down a bad path. But if enough of us, average Joes and Janes say no to these things, we can put a stop to it like that.
I know, like that.
When I was at the Air Force base, when I sent that email to the entire base, what if everybody else in the base said, you know what, this guy's right. We're going to make our own decision about whether to take this jab or not. And if you don't let us, we're going to walk. We're not going to, so you can't fire all of us. It would have stopped that day. Could you imagine 30,000 people getting ready to walk off the base if they, unless you took these mandates away? They would have stopped it, right?
We've been hijacked by China. The globalists have hijacked our governments, Tom. And I don't think there's going to be any government is going to save us. It's us. It's us that got to stand and be so strong that they back down,
Right.
down.
So find your tribe locally, work with it, find the people that you trust and feel are like-minded, that are patriots, like I said, that love individual freedom more than they love the collective. I hate that word, the collective. And communism. I like the word individual. That's the most diversity you can get. When you talk about diversity, you talk about getting all the way down to the individual. That's what this country was built on. That's what your country was built on. The spirit of individualism, of ruggedness.
We need to keep that friendship, United States and Canada. And I don't want to become the 51st state. No offense intended.
No,
I think both of our countries got a lot of problems with both. I'd like to see a republic up here in Canada, our own constitution, something that states these emergency acts that they're using to enslave us to stop, because that's what they're using in every country to enslave us. Anyway,
I encourage people, like I say, not to comply. Do not comply with the tyranny.
Tom, what would you like to say to our audience? And I kept you on here an hour and a half, and they should be thanking you for all your hard work, and I am. Thank you very much for all your surveys and what you're doing. Please back Tom Haviland. funeral embalmers, doctors, nurses, vaccine injured, speak out. Do you want this nightmare to go on? Do you want your kids to grow up in this world of tyranny? Do you want to live in 15-minute cities? Do you want digital ID? Do you want all this stuff? People like Tom Haviland that's taking their time to come on my show. I don't make nothing, by the way, Tom. Absolutely nothing. All I'm asking is for people to share.
Yeah, we just do this for free. So do myself and Laura and Richard Hirschman, we don't get paid a penny for this. We do it all because we love freedom. We love humanity. We want to warn our fellow brothers and sisters around the world. This is definitely happening. This unusual phenomena, this clotting going on. And we want to remind people, stand strong next time, say no, especially to experimental drugs. So thanks, Tony, for having me on.
Is there anything else you'd like to say before we shut her down, Tom?
Yeah, people can find my work at my assistant Laura Kasner's Substack. It's Laura, Laura, Kasner, Kasner.substack.com. And the name of the Substack is called Clotastrophe, and it's free. We don't ask any money for it at all. Just you sign up for free, and there's lots of articles on there, including the results of all our previous embalmer surveys, our people's blood clot surveys, my contact with Tucker Carlson, some other interesting things on there as well.
Well, Tom, you just send us a link and I'll put it in the description. They can click right on it. Thank you very much for joining us today on the podcast. It was a pleasure. And Tom, reach out like you did the last time. You sent me something. I said, oh my God, I got to get Tom back on here.
Sure will do.
Thank you, Tom, for joining us. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye. What are we doing?